Okay, so a year ago I started this channel with this laptop and I started making loads of content on GCSEs, how you can get all 9s like I did there, how you can get a 9 in like English, how you can get a 9 in maths, how you can get a 9 in history, and then suddenly the world turned to pretty awful, as a lot of you are probably aware, unless you've literally been in a coma. And yeah, everyone stopped watching the GCSE videos, no one really wanted it, so I started to diversify my content a bit. But now it's starting to clear up, now that we've got GCSEs, we've got A-levels, we've got all of the exams that we need to be doing this year, I'm gonna make more of the GCSE content. So today's video is how you can get a 9 in GCSE English language, English literature, and then I'm also going to be having GCSE PE and GCSE business coming very soon, as well as kind of revision methods to get 9s, how I make cue cards, study with me's and all of that. So if you want to stay involved in that, if you want to do well in your exams and just kind of move forward with a more motivated, better outlook on life and pretty much everything, then I'd strongly recommend subscribing to this channel. But yeah, today I'm going to get you the 9 English language, English literature, all of the tips I can. Let's get straight into it. This is it, how you get a 9 in English language and English literature. Starting off with English language. Okay, so is there that one magic tip that's just going to instantly get you the 9? Well, the answer to that is no, not really. You just gotta decide to put the work in. Okay, now let me explain what I mean by this first step and deciding to put the work in. What I mean is English language is a very easy subject to neglect and to almost think like you don't have to revise for it because it's basically just creative writing and looking over other pieces of text. I fell very hard for this trap, and in my November mocks the year before my actual exams, I got 5, and I wasn't very happy with this, and I looked for a way to change that and to get a 9 or get a better grade. So I put in the work, I started revising, and I started doing everything that I'm about to explain, and that put me from a 5 in my mocks to a 9 in my actual exam. So it does work. Here's what I did. Okay, there is some truth to that mindset. Like with English language, there isn't really much content that you need to revise and kind of knowledge that you have to have going into the exam. It is much more practical skills, how you can write, the techniques you can use, and how you can attack a question to get the best possible, most legible, most intricate, most coherent answer that you can. The good thing about that is it's easy to revise. There is pretty much only one thing that you can do, and this is the biggest step: practice. So what I do is I literally just attack loads and loads of practice papers and make sure that what I was writing was of the standard that I wanted it to be. And in order to check that, I'd write the paper, I'd answer the questions, and then I'd take it into my teachers or tutors, whatever, get them to mark it, get them to give feedback on it, and make sure I was working towards the best possible answers that I could be, developing those skills and gradually improving my answers over time. So that is the second step, just practice. But obviously that can be quite a challenge. It does seem like a massive chore attacking an entire paper at a time, which is why I didn't do that. I broke it down into questions. So on one day I'd answer a question 1, one day I'd answer a question 2, the next day question 3, next day question 4, etc, etc. And by the end of say a week or 2 weeks, I'd have answered every single question across 2 papers. I'd marked that, I'd got feedback on it, and I'd be working towards a better version of those answers. You don't have to worry about time or anything to start. You just have to be answering the questions, getting feedback, and developing those answers so that each time you answered a new question, it would be slightly better than the previous one. Now you can do this by either just rewriting the same question, implementing that feedback, or you can just spend 10 minutes kind of thinking about how you would have changed it, because that conscious thought about how you would have changed it really imprints that idea in your mind so that the next time you hit the exam, it's kind of in your subconscious and you know that you have to implement that idea. So just thinking about it actually stimulates the brain and makes those links so that next time when you're writing a similar thing, you kind of do implement that feedback. Obviously the best way is just to write a new answer and then remark that, but if you don't have the time or you don't want to do that, you can just consciously think about it for 10-15 minutes and how you could change that answer. Yeah. And then when you're starting to get confident in your answers, do it under exam conditions. Time yourself and make sure you're doing it within the bounds of that time. Because then you're taking all of the techniques and all of the effective answers that you've been writing and making sure that you can do them under those exams conditions. Because there's no point knowing how or knowing exactly what to write if you can't actually apply it in an exam. Keep doing that, keep moving forward, building up better answers, coherent answers, making sure that you're improving, especially under timed conditions, by marking it with the teachers, marking it with the tutors. And once you're getting a consistent score, that's pretty good, and you'll be set for the exam. Now that might all seem brilliant and you might be really motivated to do it now, but inevitably you might start to slip. You might start to prioritize other subjects over English. So then what you've got to do is just plan. You have to make sure you know what you're going to be revising, when you're going to be revising it. Sit down and kind of say, okay, on this day at this time I'm going to answer question 1. At this time on another day I'm going to answer question 2. And make sure you know what question you're answering on what day or at what time. Print off the questions, make sure they're there so that you're setting yourself up for as much success as possible. If you go to teacher answered that question at that time and you don't have it, then you're going to be spending time printing it. You're not going to be very motivated to go up, print that, then do the answer, then mark it. If you kind of see where I'm going with this, plan, make sure you know what you're doing when, and have all of the resources ready. Nice. Okay, so you now know kind of how to revise quite effectively. Just doing loads of practice papers, you know when you're going to be answering each question, you know you're going to get feedback, implement that feedback, spend a bit of time consciously thinking about how you could implement it, or actually writing it and implementing it. But it can be quite hard to do all of that and know what to write and how to implement that feedback if you haven't been taught the whole course, if you don't know all of the information that you need to know, like all of the language methods, all of the structures of the exam and all of that. So this is where First Rate Tutors come in. So First Rate Tutors basically offer an entire course on the English language and English literature AQA curriculum, and it's taught by Barbara, who's an experienced teacher, tutor and journalist. Now the course itself has over 100 video lessons that cover the entire curriculum. So focusing on language initially though, it basically explains all of the terminology that you need, goes over the structure of the exams, explores and analyses model answers, and essentially provides you with any content that you might have missed over this last year. For example, here under the important concepts and terminology explained, you actually get an entire video explaining all of the language terms, but then you also get a document telling you what everything is so that you can quickly revise all of those individual terminology. Basically filling in those gaps that may have arisen due to the current situation, giving you that solid foundation that you need to go on and do all of the revision that I've just outlined that got me that 9. But also if you haven't missed anything, it basically just allows for easy revision of all of those fundamentals, so that could be quite helpful. So scrolling down to the English language section of the course, there are basically lessons for both paper 1 and paper 2. So if we look at paper 1 as an example, you first of all get a minute summary from Barbara as to what the paper entails, and then an explanation of what the succeeding lessons are about. But then beneath that video you also get 4 complete papers with grade 9 model answers for reference as to what you need to be aiming for, so you can kind of tailor the revision that I've outlined around those answers and just get some ideas of things you could write. But then you also get 4 exam papers to do for yourself, which really helps that practice or that crucial step for revision. Then the following lesson is just a deep dive into the layout of the paper and how to kind of answer the different types of questions. It provides an example of how to derive your own answer to each of the questions with kind of a guided analysis of the text that you're given, and that's very similar as well for the paper 2 lessons that they gave you, and you again dive deeper into the structure and go over model answers, etc. So for those of you that think you could benefit from the course and use it to build your understanding of the paper and how to structure your answers and essentially fill in the gaps that may have arisen, what I've done is I've linked that course in the description below if you did want to check it out. Okay, now we'll come back to this course for English literature, but that's it for English language. So you know how to revise, you know the structure, and then there's also this course for more resources to help you do so. So the only thing left is to just get it done. There's literally no point in just watching this video and then not getting started. You just wasted, what, like 10 minutes of your life? So here, look at yourself. Look yourself in the eyes and make the conscious decision to start as soon as possible. But now, here is exactly how I revised for English literature. Nice. That is good coffee. Very good coffee. Okay, English literature. I never really felt fully confident in what I was doing to revise. It always felt kind of like I was just familiarising myself with things that might not come up, improving technique that inevitably never stayed constant, and I was never confident that I would get the grade that I got. So I kind of was reluctant to make this video, but having got all of my revision in front of me, sat it all down and analysed what I did and how it might have potentially led to me getting that grade, I now have a pretty solid understanding of why what I did worked and how you could replicate what I've done. Yeah, I've got all of my revision here, and this is pretty much how I revised to get a 9 in English literature. Let's go. Okay, so what I've come to realise is that basically English literature builds upon your ability to write like coherent and intricate answers that you've already developed in English language. So writing all of those essays, kind of analysing writers' methods, the language they use and how they do that to convey a certain idea, that is the fundamental ability that you need to succeed in English literature. But with English literature, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be writing about how the writers of given texts convey themes or use devices to portray these ideas. So you need to have a somewhat thorough understanding of the plays, of the books, of the poems, and specifically like the themes within them. A basic understanding of the storyline itself and the language devices is they use and some evidence to back it up, or to back up your argument for why they've done a certain thing. So unlike with language, where you just need that ability to write those clear, intricate, coherent answers to the questions, you actually need to kind of memorize a lot of the basic information in each of these pieces of text before you go into an English literature exam. However, with English literature, I always found it the hardest subjects to revise for, as it was all kind of so indefinite. And even though you may know the themes, quotes and storylines, unless you could form links between each of them and then use those links to write a logical argument to support the overarching idea that you were trying to convey, then you wouldn't really do very well. And as a result of me finding it quite hard to get myself together and kind of understand how I could revise for that, my initial revision wasn't really very concrete. But in the end, everything I did help to create this fundamental understanding of the themes, quotes and storylines, but also solidify my ability to bring it all together to form a definitive answer to the question, or to a number of different questions that they might possibly ask. So I'm going to explore it right now. I actually studied Jekyll and Hyde and in Spectacles, Romeo and Juliet, and the Power and Conflict poems for AQA. And this is exactly what I did and how I got the 9. Nice. Okay, so I did 2 things in particular, and these 2 things focused on A, developing your ability to write those definite answers and bring together loads of different ideas, and then B, actually have that basic understanding of the fundamental ideas, the themes, quotes, storylines, and all of the stuff that you needed to be able to form links between and write an idea or write an answer to a specific question. These 2 things were practice and cue cards. Now I'll explain a bit of both, but the practice stage was pretty much identical to the English language. I'd attempt a paper, I'd get feedback on it, I'd either consciously think about that feedback, or I would actually implement that feedback by rewriting the entire answer. And I keep doing that to improve my technique. Now that also benefited my English language, so overall practice was the most beneficial thing because it complemented both. But the cue cards were the thing that was probably pretty specific to me and exactly how I revised. So this is what I did with my cue cards and how I used them to develop an understanding of all of the texts, but also to improve my ability to make intricate links between those ideas and then put it into a legible format to convey my point of view. Yeah, I don't know why I'm so stood here, to be honest. These are the cue cards. Romeo and Juliet, Power and Conflict, in the Spectacles and Jekyll and Hyde. Now all of these cue cards I derived from my annotated versions of the poems of Jekyll and Hyde, of In Spectacles, and of Romeo and Juliet. Now don't worry if you haven't got your own annotated notes, that's where First Rate Tutors come in at the end. But that's kind of the basics of how I derived these cue cards. But now I'm going to go into a bit more in depth into what the cue cards actually contained and how, again, they helped me to get the 9. Cool. Let's go. Okay, so for In Spectacles, what I did was I made cue cards on some of the general themes and the context of the play, stating a few points about each. For example, the fact that it was set in 1912, so society was still firmly divided by the class system, and those with the most money had the most power. But also things like there wasn't as much government aid, and the fact that only men who owned property could vote. I would then use these to build upon my general knowledge of the play and provide myself with a backboard to bounce other ideas off of when it came to writing my actual essay. Next, I would write a cue card for each character in each act and include around 5 quotes from each, followed by an idea that this quote would show. For example, Sheila in Act 2 says, "You see? What did I tell you?" And this is the first sign of independence that she shows, and this idea could be used to demonstrate her character's development through the play, which could again be linked to the backboard we created with the first cue cards that women were starting to fight for their independence and the lack of a vote at the time. So these cue cards basically provide you with the foundation to establish links, and by reviewing these, you become fully equipped with all of the tools needed to answer a given question, and then further exam practice will improve your ability to use these tools and enable you to get the top marks. Okay, now the rest of the cue cards kind of apply that same principle, but in a way that's specific or specific-ish to that text. Now it doesn't really matter what this way is, so you can kind of do it however you like for the text you're studying, as long as it hits the key points I've outlined already. So kind of general themes, the storyline, quotes and evidence, and then the meaning of or potential links for those quotes and that evidence. And then anything else you think might have a good, or might be good to have an idea of. That makes sense. Anyway, here are the cue cards for the other text that I studied. So for Romeo and Juliet, I again had a cue card on each of the different themes. For example, honour,
conflict, duality, religion, astrology, and fate. Then I also had some cue cards on context, for example, the plagues at the time, the tragedy genre, the play's setting, and the patriarchy. Then I also had a cue card for each of the different characters, with one side having significant quotes from a number of different scenes, and the other side having ideas surrounding that character and those quotes. Then I also had a summary card for each act, and I had key scenes and the dramatic methods that Shakespeare used. Now for Jekyll and Hyde, I had the context and theme cards of science and evolution, medical discoveries, social class, secrecy, and the duality of man. I then had a card purely on structure and how viewpoint shifts as the novel progresses. Then, for each chapter of the novel, I had a cue card with the themes that were present in that chapter, followed by a question asking for quotes that displayed certain ideas. For example, for chapter 1, one of them was, what was a quotation for the portrayal of secrecy? And the answer on the other side was, the more it looks like Queer Street, the less I ask. I really liked this because you weren't just reading through the cue cards upon using them, you were actively recalling the information, which I found to be more effective. And then finally, on that same cue card, I also had a summary of the chapter. And then finally, for the power and conflict poems, for each of the poems, I had a cue card for structure and form with a few key points about the structure and the form and the effect of each point. I also had a cue card for language devices used and one or two things to say about each device, and then a cue card for themes and links, for example, power of nature, the poems this links to, and why. For Ozymandias, I wrote that it linked to the prelude by the power of nature, as both represented nature as all-powerful, defeating Ozymandias' legacy in Ozymandias and inducing intense fear in Wordsworth in the prelude.
Okay, so now you know how I revised and how I got the 9 and how you can get there yourself with a combination of cue cards and exam practice. But with that cue card making technique, you need to have those detailed notes and have already been through all of the text to be able to drive those cue cards, which if you haven't done because of this current situation or you just haven't been bothered, then that's where First Rate Tutors come in again. Okay, so part of her course, Barbara actually includes really detailed videos on every available text. So you've got Macbeth, you've got Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you've got A Christmas Carol, you've got An Inspector Calls, you've got Animal Farm, you've got all of the love and relationships poems, and you've got all of the power and conflict poems. So basically, whichever text you're studying as part of your course, this course covers. So what do you actually get for each of those texts? Well, it starts off with an introduction that outlines all of the context and the themes of the text and provides a summary of the text as a whole. So you can kind of use these videos and the information that it gives to derive the initial cue cards that I showed you and provide that backboard to bounce all of those links off of. So for example, for Jekyll and Hyde, Barbara actually goes into the Victorian era and builds a picture of the issues faced by people at the time, developing that backboard to spring those ideas off of, which you could again put on the cue cards. Now she also included a PowerPoint of some of this context and a summary of the novel as a whole, which I think was actually quite a nice addition, could be quite helpful. But then you also go really in deep into the texts and look at each scene, act, chapter or poem, and you kind of break it down line for line. So she's got a video for each of those acts, chapters, whatever it was, and she explores the methods used by the writer, the effects of those methods, and again provides you with the information needed to create the cue cards in a way that I've already outlined and give yourself the best chance at getting the top grade. But then finally, for each of those texts, the course actually concludes with exam questions where you explore grade 9 model answers with Barbara and the videos. But beneath that, as with English language, you also get 4 of those model answers in PDF form and another 5 papers to practice with.
Oh, and you also get detailed revision notes accompanying the text, those questions and those practice papers, basically giving you all the information that you need to form those cue cards that I've shown before.
So basically, whether you've missed any content or you're looking for extra resources, this course by First Rate Tutors is going to be really beneficial in boosting your ability to exploit the methods I've already outlined and attain the highest possible grade that you can. So if you do want to check it out, I have linked them in the description as I've already said. Nice. Okay, but unfortunately that is it for today's video, so I hope you've enjoyed that video. I hope you found it helpful and it's given you a bit more motivation on an idea of how to revise for English, literature and language, and hopefully it's going to be enough to get you that 9 get you to wherever you want to be, that next step in this weird journey. But as a little side note, I got a bit bored, so I set up an online shop for all of these cue cards. If you want to look at it in the description below, I'm probably going to be putting them up for like 50p or £1 or something like that. So yeah, I just got a bit bored and thought, you know what, why not? So if you want to see more of that with all of my other subjects, then let me know, I guess. Otherwise, I've got loads more videos coming very, very soon, including business revision, PE revision, all of the ones that I mentioned at the start of the video. So if you do like this content, if you do want to see more, and just loads of other wacky, weird, wonderful things, please drop a subscribe, drop a like, and just kind of comment what you want to see. Yeah, otherwise that's it for me, and I'll see you in the next one.
I live inside my own world of make-believe.